Walter, you've been a Boys Life comic character since the beginning of the color comic pages in 1952. Why don't you tell our readers about the comic pages and some of the other characters you've met there?
Hey, first of all, never mind calling me Walter. Everybody calls me Pee-wee. And can I ever tell some stories? I sure hope you're an experienced reporter, because I am prepared to tell you everything about the comics. And let me just say, it's great to be out of the comics for a while. I mean, the pictures are fine, but ideas get all cramped up in those comic page balloons, and it's hard to let the words really fly.
And you certainly can let them fly.
Why, I remember the time when Roy Blakely, he's my patrol leader, and I got this great old railroad car for a scout meeting place. Only the railroad lost us and pulled us to about a jillion other places before it finally got us home. But we weren't lost. No, sir. We always knew where we were. It was the railroad that was lost. Well, me and Roy and Westy caught some car thieves and got stuck on a bridge. And the train was coming, but my idea to make a signal and stop the train saved our lives. And I guess I've been a hero ever since. Say, are you getting all this down?
Yes, we thankfully have a high-speed recording device. But by the way, could you hold down the shouting? Pedro the Mailburro's trying to sleep.
Oh, sorry. What do you mean by thankfully?
Only that it's state-of-the-art. Anyway, we went down to the Boys Life Damp and Dark Archives department and looked up the very first Pee Wee Harris comic pages, starting back in September 1952. We read about that mix-up with your railroad car and how the girls at Camp Ahwahnee used you as a first aid practice dummy.
I don't want to talk about that!
But the part about the car thieves and your, heroism, where was all that?
Look, you must be the new guy around here. The whole story wouldn't fit in the comic pages. Didn't you look in the April 1920 issue? That was one of the most famous magazine issues ever. Why, that was the start of the Pee Wee Harris story. It ran for 8 issues, 37 chapters, written down by Mr. Percy K. Fitzhugh, just the way I told him.
Truly amazing.
You think that's amazing? You think that's amazing? Well, listen to this.
Please, no shouting. Remember Pedro.
Oh, sorry again. It's just that I thought you'd like to know how I told Mr. Al Stenzel to do the page on the Cub Scout twins back in 1953.
So, you're responsible for the Tracy twins?
Well, I don't like to boast, but Mr. Stenzel was trying to create some Cub Scout characters. He said he wanted a Cub Scout who would be as good as I am. And I said, then I guess you'll need at least 2 of them. And he said, that's it, twins. So the Tracy twins were born. Are you getting all this?
Yes, indeed.
As I was saying, those funny Cub Scout twins became almost as famous as yours truly. And then along came Dink and Duff and Weeblos Woody.
Now, wait a minute. You're not gonna say that you helped create them too, are you?
Well, I don't like to brag, but it was in 1984, and the editors were talking to Mr. Tom Eaton about some new characters. I knew these 2 funny Cub Scouts and this really wacky Weeblo Scout who had a smart parrot. These kids kind of admired me. So when I told them how I became a comic character, they showed up one day on Mr. Eaton's drawing board.
Just like that?
Well, sort of. Mr. Eaton remembers that he thought a long time about it, and he made up 2 Cub Scouts. Dink was the thoughtful, organized one, and Duff was always rushing around without much thought and getting in trouble. You know the kind of guy. Good-hearted, well-meaning, but sometimes too sure of himself for his own good.
Do we ever?
Shh! Don't wake up the Mailburro, remember?
Sorry.
But anyway, as I was saying, those 2 guys are exactly like the 2 kids I know.
And Woody?
Same story. The Weeblo Scout looks up to me being older and with so much experience as a comic page hero. I expect he went to see Mr. Eaton to get into the comics in imitation of me.
And what does Tom Eaton have to say?
He says he wanted to make a character who was kind of off the wall. A guy who would invent really crazy stunts in games and think up wild inventions while he followed the Weeblo Scout program.
Then you think Dink and Duff and Weeblos Woody broke into the comics because they admired you and wanted to imitate you?
Well, I don't like to brag.
Anyway, how about your new look that started in the November 1997 issue?
Oh, the new look was a lot of work for me.
Work for you? How about Mike Adair, the artist who did all the drawing?
Are you kidding? Do you know how much work it is to train a new artist? Now, don't get me wrong, Mr. Mike Adair is a very good artist, but I had to train him to work in comic page style. For a while, we had to go out and get people kind of like you to write the scripts.
What do you mean, people kind of like me?
You know, just Plain old writers, guys who can't draw.
Oh yes, I guess I know the type.
But Mr. Adair was a fast learner. After he learned to draw the kind of pictures I wanted, it was easy for him to do the stories too.
Easy?
Sure. He already knew the alphabet. After that, he just needed to put the words in the right order, and there it was. Story and pictures. My page. Did you know that when the editors gave him the job of drawing me, he said he felt like he had been, quote, entrusted with the Washington Monument of Boys' Life, unquote?
That is hard to believe. Pee Wee Harris, the George Washington of comics? Just as George Washington was the father of our country, you were the father of Boys' Life comics?
I never looked at it that way before, but I inspired the whole Boys' Life comics section. Who could have imagined it? Who would have believed that just one young scout started out in 1920 as a humble story character would one day become the inspiration who would someday change the face of Boys' Life magazine? Hey, where are you going? I'm just getting started. I've got lots more to tell you.
Thanks a lot, Pee Wee, but we'll just save that for another anniversary.